A glittering royal escape that was supposed to rewrite history is now being whispered about as one of Hollywood's most dramatic implosions, where every smile, every deal, every carefully staged moment is starting to look less like success and more like a carefully collapsing illusion hiding in plain sight.
Meghan Markle has been dumped again by her agent, this time, who just so happens to be the most powerful agent in all of Hollywood.
And just like that, the narrative cracks open. Because what happens when the world stops clapping? When the cameras don't just zoom out, they turn away completely? In the heart of Montecito, the story of Harry and Meghan, once sold as a bold reinvention of royalty, now allegedly unfolds like a slow professional disappearance. Industry whispers don't scream anymore, they echo silence. And silence in Hollywood, that's never neutral. That's rejection dressed as politeness. Reports circulating through entertainment circles suggest that the once unstoppable Sussex momentum has shifted into something far more uncomfortable, a reputation freeze, where names that once opened doors now reportedly cause hesitation behind them. And it gets sharper when you follow the trail of alliances that once defined their rise. Oprah Winfrey, the most powerful voice in televised storytelling, once stood at the center of their defining media moment. But now, insiders describe an uncomfortable distance, a silence so deliberate it feels louder than words. That 2021 interview, once framed as explosive truth-telling, has reportedly become a shadow in elite media circles, especially after inconsistencies in key claims began circulating publicly. Among the most repeated talking points is the controversial claim about a secret wedding before the royal ceremony, later disputed by official religious authorities, turning what was once emotional revelation into reputational risk. And in Hollywood, nothing ages faster than a story that stops being airtight. But the real storm, the one allegedly shaking the foundations of their American empire, comes from the business side, the machinery that was supposed to convert fame into longevity. William Morris Endeavor, one of the most powerful talent agencies in the world, has been at the center of intense speculation after reports surfaced of a dramatic internal fallout. Sources whisper that tensions escalated behind closed doors, especially during the Thanksgiving period of 2025, when expectations allegedly collided with agency boundaries in a way that insiders describe as irreparable. Demands, pressure, disappointment, depending on who is speaking, the story changes shape. But the outcome they all agree on is the same: separation. And once that protective structure disappeared, the cracks reportedly widened fast. In Hollywood, representation isn't just support, it's insulation. Without it, even the brightest names are exposed to the cold mathematics of performance. And suddenly, the Sussex projects that once carried massive anticipation began drifting into something far more dangerous in entertainment terms: uncertainty, development delays, quiet shelving, creative hesitation, the kind of industry language that never sounds like failure until you realize it always means exactly that. Meanwhile, the media narrative itself begins to fracture. Publications that once amplified their perspective now appear to be shifting tone. Headlines that used to sympathize now analyze. And analysis in celebrity culture is often the first step toward detachment. One widely circulated report pointed to stalled entertainment ventures and unmet expectations, painting a picture not of sabotage but of underdelivery. And in Hollywood, underdelivery is more unforgiving than controversy. Then comes the branding contradiction that keeps resurfacing like a recurring glitch in the story. On one hand, a carefully constructed image of royal sensitivity, restraint, and elevated standards. On the other, a history of explosive public commentary against the very institution now being referenced in defense of silence and delay. Industry observers allegedly describe this shift as strategic repositioning, while critics call it something far less flattering: narrative recycling. Because when projects fail to land, the explanation begins to shift shape until failure itself is reframed as principle. And yet, perhaps the most visually symbolic layer of this entire saga comes not from boardrooms or headlines, but from lifestyle optics: high-profile gatherings, celebrity intersections, carefully managed appearances that sometimes spiral into public relations discomfort. One such incident, widely discussed in entertainment commentary, involves attendance at a major celebrity celebration that coincided with the sensitive remembrance period in the UK. What should have been invisible reportedly became viral, and once images circulate, intention stops mattering, perception takes over. Suddenly, every move is being interpreted, every silence dissected, every decision re-examined under a microscope that only grows sharper with time. Are they retreating? Are they rebranding? Or are they, by, as some insiders allegedly suggest, simply losing control of the narrative that once defined them. Because in Hollywood, the scariest transformation isn't scandal, it's irrelevance. And that is where, according to industry whispers, the Sussex story begins to shift into unfamiliar territory. Not downfall in a single moment, but erosion over time. A slow, uncomfortable fading from center stage into something far harder to recover from, being discussed more than desired, analyzed more than admired, and predicted more than celebrated. And just as the tension reaches its peak, another layer begins to surface, one that ties business collapse, media strategy, and royal identity into a single unsettling question: what happens when the brand you built starts using the very institution you rejected as its final defense? Because that is where the next part of this story takes an even sharper turn. And that question, once it enters the narrative, begins to spread like wildfire through every corner of the industry. Because suddenly nothing about the Sussex story feels linear anymore. It feels layered, reactive, almost like a constant repositioning against pressure rather than a stable long-term strategy. And in Hollywood, instability is never ignored. It is studied, whispered about, and eventually monetized. Behind the polished surface of Montecito life, the conversation allegedly shifts towards something far more uncomfortable: control. Who controls the narrative when the deals slow down? Who defines relevance when headlines turn colder? And most importantly, what happens when the audience starts noticing the pattern instead of the performance? That shift in perception, according to entertainment insiders, is where the real damage begins. Because once the industry stops reacting emotionally and starts responding analytically, everything changes. Suddenly, every move is no longer seen as innovation, it is seen as strategy. Every silence becomes intentional, every statement becomes calculated, and every delay becomes suspicious. Whispers surrounding streaming deals only intensify this perception. Once positioned as groundbreaking partnerships meant to reshape the entertainment landscape, these projects are now described in industry language that feels noticeably colder. Recalibration, reassessment, extended development cycles. Terms that sound harmless on paper but in Hollywood often translate into one thing: diminishing confidence. And confidence, once lost, rarely returns in the same form. Meanwhile, the personal branding narrative begins to take on a more defensive posture. Instead of expansion, there is protection. Instead of momentum, there is justification. And at the center of it all emerges a recurring theme that insiders describe as the royal shield, a rhetorical strategy that allegedly frames professional slowdown as adherence to elevated standards tied to monarchy protocol. But critics argue this creates a contradiction that is increasingly difficult to maintain, especially given the couple's long-standing public break from that same institution. And contradictions in the world of high-profile celebrity branding are never neutral. They accumulate, they build weight, they become reference points in every conversation, every critique, every industry assessment. Then comes the fashion world layer, arguably one of the most telling indicators of elite acceptance or rejection. Luxury houses, known for their strict control over image alignment, reportedly remain cautious, not hostile, but distant. And in that world, distance is louder than rejection, because rejection can be negotiated. Distance is already a decision that has been made. And as these professional doors remain partially closed, another door quietly opens: the influencer economy, a space built not on prestige but on proximity, not on legacy but on relatability. And this pivot, according to commentators, marks a significant tonal shift in the Sussex brand, from global institutional relevance to curated domestic intimacy, from royal adjacency to lifestyle monetization, from diplomatic influence to algorithmic engagement. But even this shift does not unfold without friction, because every attempt to appear authentic is now viewed through a lens of skepticism. Every personal moment becomes content, every family glimpse becomes data, and every narrative of simplicity is weighed against the reality of extreme privilege. That tension becomes most visible in the growing debate around their children's media presence. Supporters see it as controlled storytelling, critics see it as strategic visibility, and analysts see something else entirely: a last remaining asset in an attention economy that is becoming harder to sustain. And when children enter the narrative economy, even indirectly, the stakes become emotionally charged in ways that are impossible to fully control. Meanwhile, within the UK royal ecosystem, silence becomes its own form of response. No direct engagement, no public confrontation, just distance. And that distance, according to royal commentators, is not accidental, it is structural. A monarchy that once absorbed crisis now appears to be filtering it out entirely, replacing chaos with continuity, drama with succession planning, controversy with forward forward motion. And perhaps that is the most unsettling contrast in the entire story. On one side, a narrative constantly in motion, constantly reacting, constantly recalibrating. On the other, an institution moving forward without looking back at all. Because while one story fights to remain visible, the other no longer needs visibility to survive. And that brings everything to a quiet but powerful realization whispered through industry corridors. The Sussex story is no longer just about fame or failure. It is about relevance itself. Who still needs the spotlight and who has learned to live without it? And as April 2026 unfolds, that question doesn't just linger in Hollywood or London. It hangs everywhere, unanswered.